Shit, they're actually bombing us right now. Damn!
Damn!
There, do you see it in the clouds?
Ha ha! Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow!
Right now there's a tragedy in Russia. Super powerful missiles have put the Kremlin on high alert.
People there must have been in complete shock just now as they were coming out of the store. Whoa, that is truly unbelievable. I can hardly believe it myself.
There, over there in the clouds, the third one, damn. Is it still there?
Bella 5.
Yeah.
Look, it's flying. There it goes! It's really heading for the refinery! Yeah, to the refinery!
Urgently, the air defense forces have launched a fresh batch of retaliation with the pair. After these strikes, the disaster zone has flared up even more. The ATACMS hit their target precisely. Moscow shook from the explosions. Russia is falling to its knees. Ukrainian weapons are sweeping away everything in their path. The deep rear has started to crumble. The Russian oil refinery and thermal power plant have been destroyed. A blackout has struck enemy territory like lightning. At last it has begun. Putin is handing out a manual to Russians on how to survive. Hello, I'm Renata Aslanova, and in our episode of Red Line, we'll cover all the explosive news. Watch until the end. Sensational news. NATO ATACMS are tearing Russia apart. The Ukrainian armed forces have pressed the revenge button.
There, do you see it in the clouds?
A massive explosion. The locals are practically hysterical. They weren't ready for this kind of action. Voronezh is under a hellish attack.
I live in a 15-story building. I'll die instantly.
The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces confirmed a targeted strike with ATACMS. They emphasized that this is a significant event demonstrating Ukraine's commitment to its sovereign defense.
The armed forces of Ukraine successfully used ATACMS tactical missile systems to deliver a precision strike on military targets within Russian territory.
The Russian Ministry of Defense immediately started shouting about intercepted missiles and began fantasizing about their own victory.
4 operational tactical missiles were used by the adversary against the city of Voronezh. ATACMS, manufactured in the USA. During the missile defense battle, Russian combat crews operating the S-400 air defense missile system and the Pantsir missile gun system shot down all the ATACMS missiles.
There, up in the clouds, is the third one, damn it. There's more over there.
There were 5.
Well, yes.
But photos from the attack sites completely exposed the Kremlin's lies. Rocket debris fell directly on the building.
There, people were probably in shock just now. They left the store. There are people looking over there too. What? Where from? Siren! Yes, they live in a kind of cloud of shells, rather. In total.
According to the Russian version, there were no casualties as a result of the strike. To support their claim, the Russians even published a photo of the remains of a ATACMS missile. These images finally shattered the myth about intercepted ATACMS, showing traces of a standard detonation with no sign whatsoever of air defense involvement, only a cluster warhead in action. The myth of interception fell apart just as quickly as the missile did at the moment of explosion. Video from Voronezh showed 4 smoky trails in the sky, the distinctive mark of ATACMS cluster munitions deploying. And this directly suggests the main point. It seems that Russian air defense did not intercept a single one of the 4 missiles launched. And shook. Moscow was also hit. The capital of Russia came under a barrage of drones. Sheremetyevo and Vnukovo were paralyzed. Local authorities urgently implemented the cover plan, and the city was in panic.
A drone attack heading for Moscow was repelled. Emergency service specialists are working at the site where the debris fell.
But that's not all. Krasnodar Krai also witnessed a new series of powerful explosions. A judgment day for Russians. An apocalypse struck Slavyansk on Kuban. 20 massive explosions, a deadly blow to the enemy's oil heart. The Ilsky oil refinery is burning so intensely it can be seen from space. It's
Flying! There it goes! Right at the oil refinery.
The Ilsky oil refinery was hit between 11:30 p.m. and 1 a.m. The consequences are being clarified. Official Krasnodar remains silent.
Fiery chaos in Belgorod region. The Vokzalny shopping center in Korocha is burning after a drone strike. Russian forces scrambled, trying to put out the strike, but the flames engulfed the building almost instantly. Dramatic footage of the fire has already flooded Russian telegram channels. The thick smoke covered the city, serving as a warning that the war is already near. Drones are attacking at full force. Power went out in neighboring villages and windows were blown out in an apartment building. The war has finally come knocking on Russians' doors. In occupied Donetsk, there is darkness. Key thermal power plants, Zuyevskaya and Starobeshevskaya, were hit. The so-called local authorities are already talking about an unprecedented attack on the power system. For his part, Pushilin confirmed that the strike was large-scale and destructive. Panic among the occupiers is growing by the minute.
Budyani Square?
4:30 in the morning, the lights went out and everything is dark.
The internet is buzzing. Donetsk, Makivka, Ilovaisk, and several other cities were plunged into darkness after a powerful attack. Locals are frantically sharing videos of the explosions. A night in Oriol. The city was shaken by explosions. There is panic in social media. The sky was covered with black smoke, and fire is engulfing everything around.
All right. All right.
A night of terror in the city. A powerful strike hit the thermal power plant directly. Explosions thundered one after another. After the first two explosions, people began reporting 3 more. And panic swept through the city.
There's smoke rising. It's not clear what's going on over there. What do you mean, smoke? Where is it coming from?
And once again, the Russian air defense is doing its usual job. Once again, they're hitting their own facilities, adding to the chaos and panic. Things were just as intense in the Samara region. Ukraine's defense forces delivered a devastating strike on the oil refinery and Rubicon's UAV warehouse
As part of efforts to reduce the enemy's offensive potential and complicate the supply of fuel and ammunition to the occupiers' military units, units of Ukraine's defense forces struck the facilities of the Novokuybishevsk oil refinery in Russia's Samara region.
Yet another problem is crashing down on the heads of Russians. Unknown drones may have struck a power substation in Samara. According to reports from the Information Resistance, the regional center of Russia is already experiencing the first signs of a large-scale blackout. Meanwhile, the governor of Samara region insists that the attack was repelled. There are no casualties, but tactfully remains silent about any destruction. Instead, he began to intimidate Russians with threats of consequences for any footage showing burning sites. Basically, if you show the truth, you'll be held responsible yourself. Locals are in a panic. Residents are reporting in their community groups about at least 10 powerful explosions in 2 different districts of the city. There was no air raid alert. Only after the strike on a residential apartment building did the governor of Volgograd report a massive attack. According to him, 3 people were injured. The local air defense is operating, and this is already the second strike on the building this week.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Meanwhile, the Kursk region is taking a heavy hit. After a drone attack, a factory producing insulation materials for the Russian army caught fire. In Russia, they claim that 10 drones were shot down. Nevertheless, the facility is burning with the fire of Ukrainian vengeance. The skies over Russia are controlled by the Ukrainian armed forces. An entire enemy air defense division is out of action. This is a major blow to their defenses. Ukrainian drones are destroying Russian forces with precision, opening a gap in their defenses that can't be hidden. This lightning-fast operation has already gone down in history. A series of precision strikes made Putin catch his breath. The consequences are felt hundreds of kilometers from the border. Stay tuned for the first details.
First, at least 4 were burned out, and second, 2 more radars were destroyed. And that's not counting the fact that a dozen such systems may have been damaged.
New details, new conclusions. It turns out that the strike on Novorossiysk on the night of November 14th marked not just the collapse of Russian oil supplies, but also became the most powerful blow to Russian air defense systems during the entire war.
Ukraine carried out one of the most devastating strikes against Russian air defenses. It destroyed 4 S-400 launchers and 2 radar stations from this battery at once.
Ukrainian media reported this yesterday, citing sources in the SBU. It became known that 4 S-400 Triumph launchers were completely destroyed. They were located on the territory of the Kuban Red Banner Regiment's military unit. In total, there were 12 such launchers at the site. The security service believes that some of the other launchers were also partially hit, and therefore the entire division has been put out of action.
If something is overlooked in this regard, then when these launchers need to operate, an abnormal situation could occur, which could again lead to the detonation of the launcher or cause the missile to fly off course. In general, there could be a variety of different consequences in this case. And if some seemingly minor issue is overlooked at first glance, so basically, the entire base can now be written off at this point.
At the same time, 2 expensive radars from these long-range air threat detection systems were destroyed, as well as the targeting radar that was actually guiding those S-400s. At the same time, even multi-million-dollar losses aren't the main issue here. What's more important is that right now, the Russians simply have nothing to replace the lost equipment with.
While it's still somewhat possible to replace the launchers, it's extremely difficult to replace the radars, as you know. Because each radar is a high-tech instrument, and under sanctions it's very hard, time-consuming and expensive to assemble one. Here there were 2 radars at once, and both were operating as part of a specific battery. In other words, the battery has fallen apart. Now it needs to find a new radar, that is, its eyes, without which air defense is rendered useless.
What exactly our defense forces used to strike Novorossiysk still remains unclear. Most likely, it was the SBU operating drones. However, several Ukrainian special services were involved in the attack at once. So analysts agree that the strike was a combined one.
You just need to make a wish at night. What kind of wish was it for Novorossiysk? See? Wishes have a way of coming true. So that's the kind of menu our defense forces offer. It's always a pleasure. But seriously, if we're talking about the systematic nature of such strikes, it's so systematic that they hit 2 or 3 times.
It's also worth noting that the destruction of military equipment and port infrastructure in Novorossiysk is just the culmination of the entire operation, which was carefully prepared and along the way destroyed even more, quite a few Russian targets.
Just the day before, there were strikes on Feodosia, including the Feodosia oil depot and the Kirovsky airfield near Feodosia. At the same time, the Feodosia Air Defense District was also hit, which allowed our missile forces and drone operators to reach Novorossiysk. This is a very high-value target.
At the same time, the same sources in the SBU add that, for now, an entire air defense division in Novorossiysk has been put out of action, leaving a huge gap in Russian defenses which Ukrainian drones and missiles will undoubtedly exploit.
Drone warfare is reaching a new level, and this needs to be seen. The Russians boast about the latest technologies in their drones, but at the same time, they keep losing battles one after another. Our combat birds are leading the way, and Ukrainian defenders are giving the world a masterclass. The enemy is being destroyed, and with every strike, their desire to advance onto our land disappears. All of this in detail. Don't miss what's coming up next.
A UAV operator from the 110th Separate Mechanized Brigade perfectly drops a grenade into a trench with Russian soldiers. One of them tries to throw the explosive out but doesn't make it in time. As a result of the successful drop, several occupiers were eliminated. This is exactly what modern warfare looks like now. In fact, there are practically no assaults or frontal attacks with vehicles. Drones have put an end to positional warfare. That was the headline of an article published in the American outlet Politico. The fighting in Ukraine no longer resembles the trench warfare of World War I. Instead, drones have erased the continuous front line, creating a kill zone. As a result, a gray zone of chaos has formed, stretching about 20 kilometers from the front line where drones hunt for soldiers. The wounded are left to die since it is extremely difficult to evacuate them, and delivering ammunition, food, and water to the fighting troops is nearly impossible. The sky above the gray zone is shrouded in smoke from drones. UAVs are equipped with thermal imagers, cameras, bombs, and cannons. And some lie for hours along the roads waiting for military vehicles to pass by. At the same time, there is a hunt for UAV pilots who are sitting tens of kilometers away. We have moved on to a war of drones against drones. Now drones can set up ambushes, intercept enemy logistics systems, and disrupt supply lines. In addition, it has become more difficult to hold positions. If you are detected, all the weaponry in the area will immediately be directed at your destruction. Pavel Polisa, Colonel of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Russian military public pages quote this article, but as always, in their own way. Here's one example of Russian propaganda where it says that Russian drones don't give the Ukrainian armed forces a moment's rest. Although in reality, it's exactly the opposite. Because of Russian drones, Ukrainian soldiers are forced to stay at their positions for weeks. Drones make evacuation, rotation, and the delivery of ammunition and food deadly dangerous. Information from open sources shows that it is actually the Russian army that abandons its wounded soldiers instead of evacuating them. Now, Russia is also trying to keep up in the production of various strike UAVs. For example, in frontline areas, the enemy has started using a new type of Iranian drones, the Shahed 101. The warhead weighs 8 to 9 kilograms, and the flight range is several hundred kilometers. So far, the occupiers have not managed to localize the production of this drone in Russia. The UAVs were produced in 2024 in Iran, but it's only a matter of time. The Russians learned quickly from their mistakes.
We're going head-to-head with them, and they have some very impressive developments. They have a well-established system sciences working. They've managed to suppress, to break down, any internal resistance, any attempts to oppose the war. That's why they have these developments, and the machine is running. They prepared for war, they improved the Shaheds, and they made Lancets based on Israeli drones.
Drones have become so effective that they've even pushed artillery back from the front line and have made it nearly impossible to use armored vehicles to supply the troops. Drones have become useful for delivery and evacuation, combat reconnaissance, and remote mining, tasks that were previously usually carried out by people in war. Despite differing resource capabilities, Ukraine currently has drone parity with Russia on the front lines, and in some areas even an advantage. But the development of this military component doesn't stop for a single